So sorry, before moving to the back side, we can now remove completely the antenna here. Just remove the cable from the guides and pull gently on this small connector from the motherboard, and you will have released completely the antenna, and you can put it aside. So basically, as you can see, what you really need to remember after you finish with this part, and that's the biggest part of the disassembly, is to remember all these connectors. So we have the Wi-Fi connector, hope you can see it clearly. So here is the Wi-Fi antenna connector. This was the power supply unit connection alongside with these two blades. Then there is the Blu-ray power and the Blu-ray data, let's call it data cable, which goes to the Blu-ray unit. And you will also need to remember to place the cables in the respective guides when you reassemble everything back. So now we can move to the other side and start the disassembly of the back side. It's actually the front side, well, whatever. So okay, to disassemble the back side, we start again by removing some Torx screws on this side. So there's one here. Just don't lose them. Oh, come on. And okay, so then I would say this one came off from my shield, probably from before, and I think that now we could probably, so we snap again the plastic by using your fingers, starting from the front this time, and I think there should be nothing keeping this in place. So just pull up from this side, and when you have removed 1, 2 Torx screws, then you can, again using your fingers, basically make the plastic part detach from the PS4. And now you will also have the front shield removed. Here is the basically this clear plastic part is a light bar which will carry the light from the LEDs through the bar and make it shine through. Now to remove the shield from the motherboard, you will need to remove the Torx screws, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. Then we will come to the spring, which is held by these two Phillips head screws. So now start by removing all of the Torx screws. There are 12 of them and you need to remove them all. And you will have removed the last screw which held the metal shield in place. So now for this last part, this is an important bit. You will need to switch to the Phillips head again, and my advice is to, you can see I already did this from the previous disassembly, mark the position of these screws, because this is basically a spring which pushes, so below the shield is the motherboard, and this one pushes the APU, so the microcontroller, against the heatsink surface to basically squash the thermal paste and ensure that there is a contact between the surfaces. So it's not like you will need a torque sensitive screwdriver, but if you mark the position, you can then remove the screw, count how many turns you're making, so that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Just pull up slightly so you know when the torque 13, so when the screw is outside of the thread. So with 13 turns I remove this screw. And same goes for this one. I mean, if there is like a small offset, that's no big deal, but just remember, I expect it to be close to 13. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Start pulling slightly upwards. 10, 11, 12, and 13, 14 almost. Okay, so remember which screw is which. So put the lower one here and the upper one here. And okay, so now you have this one, mark the side, but you will recognize the right position because this one is slightly bent inwards where it pushes against the microcontroller. So the fact that I keep a memory of how basically how much torque there was on the screws is the fact that this is something which ensures a force on the microcontroller. So I want it to be reassembled as close to the original as possible. That's why by just remembering how many times you turn the screw, you will ensure that the proper torque is applied and this piece is in the same position as it was before. So now we can remove, by pulling up the shield from the motherboard, and here there are some thermal pads. Okay, I hope you can see them clearly. This one, they should remain attached to the metal. If they don't and they stay attached on the memory chips, that's not a problem because they are sticky, so they will stick to both ends, while this plastic spacer is just a spacer. So you can remove now the shield. There will be a lot of dust here, so make sure that you clean this metal shield thoroughly, and also the motherboard. Now everything you see is very clean, but I think yours will be dusty. So now the last step is to remove the motherboard from the lower part where also the fan is. There is just a small connector here for the fan. The fan connector is just fit. If you just need to basically pull it up, so it fits by pushing down on the motherboard connector. So you don't need to pull it on the right, so you don't need to pull it sideways. You need to pull it up gently. Don't snap it. It's just 3 cables. It comes off quite easily. Okay, so now back to disassembling the motherboard from the metal part below. So now comes the last part, which is quite easy, where what we need to do is to disassemble and remove the motherboard from the chassis below. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that the motherboard has soldered onto it the USB port on the front and all the connectors, hope you can see them, on the back, so the HDMI connector, network connector, and when you remove it you just need to be to think about how they're moving to remove them from the frame. So to basically lift it and pull it in the correct way to make the connectors either fit when you reassembly or come apart from the plastic chassis. So you start by the front side, the USB side, by pulling up. So you need to grab the silicone part, so the motherboard, it lifts up really easily, okay, and then you want to pull towards you to make all the connectors come out of the frame, and so no cables will hold it in place, and there you go. Here is the disassembled motherboard of the PlayStation 4, and we can now replace the thermal paste. So here you can see, just let me get this out of the way, you can see the corresponding part where the thermal paste is on the heatsink, and you can now see the microcontroller. So this was my already the Arctic silver replacement I did not so long ago. There is some dust here, so you can start by obviously cleaning this place thoroughly. Here the fan is always full of dust, so start by, sorry, I'll go off camera, just remove the dust from the fan thoroughly. This region will be the dirtiest one. If there is some dust around here, please remove it. And also on this side, this will be, I think, what you need to be careful to clean out the most. So the fan here, hope you can see it clearly, the heatsink here, so blow some air inside the fins of the heatsink like this. So keep the fan in place. A lot of dust will come out, surely. Just give a good clean to the fan. This is what gets noisy. This is basically what gets dirty. So when you're done, just remove it out of the way, and we now are left with the motherboard. Okay, so to clean the old paste from the APU, just use a Q-tip. You spray the isopropyl alcohol or whatever detergent you're using on the Q-tip, never directly on the electronics. And then also with the help of a toothbrush, a toothpick, you can remove the excess paste from the sides. So just be patient, use the Q-tip, use some paper, wipe out carefully the old thermal paste and try to remove it from the sides, from everywhere. So I will show you that carefully, and with some patience, in the end you will get a new shiny and clean APU. So be patient and repeat everything as needed, and in the end, until some Q-tips later, you are left with a new and shiny APU, completely clean with no residual old paste. So just use paper, Q-tips, isopropyl alcohol, whatever alcohol you can use in small amounts, maybe a toothpick, maybe a toothbrush, but no metal stuff, nothing which can scratch or damage the APU. So when you're done with the motherboard, so on the APU, on the motherboard, you will also need to do the same, but it's quite easier and faster for the thermal pad. So here you can just spray some alcohol even on the surface itself and start by rubbing the old paste off, and then we will remove it with a cloth or something soft, but here you can just be a little more rough because it's just metal beneath the surface, so you will probably wipe it in just one go. There we go. Don't mess up the thermal pads for the memory chips, and just clean the metal part from the old residue. And I think we will just give it another go here, wherever you can see the old paste. You will be left with your brand new clean heatsink, so that the metal part here will be completely clean from the old paste. Okay, so now you are ready to put the new paste on the motherboard. That's the next thing we will do, but before this I recommend, until you have no paste around on your motherboard, to practice basically the reassembly of the motherboard and the chassis. So you will need basically be careful about, again, the two blade connectors of the power supply, because they will need to fit inside the window. Then you will need to insert the motherboard towards the end to make the, so I'm basically pushing away from me to try and fit all the connectors, HDMI and network, in the proper place. And once they go in, once they fit in the plastic frame, basically you just drop down the motherboard and you're done. So you need to practice this to be able to do it swiftly, because once we press down the motherboard against the metal, we will squish the thermal paste. So we just need to do this once, otherwise we risk messing around with the thermal paste and this surface, and we just need to put a small amount of thermal paste on the motherboard and make sure it gets in contact. So now you're ready to prepare the motherboard with the new thermal paste. Okay, and to do so, you can now take your thermal paste, the new one, and maybe a toothpick or something to help you just spread the thermal paste on the APU. Just be careful and remind that you don't need a huge amount of thermal paste, and think about what will happen. We will basically squish the thermal paste between the surface, so the one of the APU, and the thermal pad, so the metal of the thermal pad on the other side. So, and there's a really small gap there. So we just need to evenly distribute some thermal paste, just a small amount, and the squishing, so that spring which we removed before will do the rest. So I think that this will be more than needed, and just be careful. You can start by spreading it around with the help of a toothpick, but remember that when you assemble everything together, the pressure will do it for you, so no need to spread it to the edges. The pressure will take care of that for you. And that's it. So basically just spread around the paste a small quantity, and you will be ready to reassemble the motherboard, and the squishing between the motherboard and the heatsink will do the rest. So just remember a small amount, spread it out if you're able with a toothpick, just a little bit, and you're ready to go. Okay, so now we will reassemble the motherboard onto the heatsink. So as I recommended before, if you have practiced, now you should be all set to just do it in quite a swift motion. The important thing is just the when you touch the thermal pad with the micro. So you insert the blade inside the window, try to fit the connectors, and then you lower down the motherboard and you are done. You press down now, and you don't want to move the motherboard anymore from this position. So the next thing we will do is we will reinstall the connector for the fan, which is here. We press it down and we are done. So now we can reinstall the heat shield, oh sorry, the shield, it's a metal shield, onto the motherboard, and with the pressure from the screws then we will fix it in place and bring down the contact between the APU and the metal pad. Okay, so now we can reassemble the shield with the torque screw, and if you follow my advice you also will remember the right order for these two screws, which we can start to reassemble right now. So we need the Phillips head, which is here, and the screwdriver. We'll move this aside, we don't need this one anymore. I hope you can see everything correctly. So now I will start from the initial position and count up to 14 turns. So there we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so I will just spare the last one after I put the other screw to make the tension between the two as even as possible. So I will just start screwing the other one in, and then try to lock them as together as possible. 10, 11, 12, and that's already in place. And this one, let's do another one, and that's in place. Okay, so now everything is set up as it was before. We make sure that there is a good contact, and now we reassemble all of the torque screws which locked up the heat shield, the EMC shield to the motherboard. So we start by screwing them one by one with the torque set.